This is about Tulsi Gabbard, and she is basically stepping up to have a bill to stop Trump from pulling out of the INF treaty. So, just to let you guys know, Democratic president candidate Tulsi Gabbard has now introduced a bill to Congress which would prevent President Donald Trump from withdrawing the U.S. from the Intermediate Range Nuclear Forces Treaty, INF. Now, she spoke to a conference on Friday, and Tulsi Gabbard said the decision to pull out of the 1988 treaty was reckless, was exacerbating a new Cold War with Russia, and could spark another arms race. Now, again, this treaty that was signed in 1988 was a very big deal between the United States and then Soviet Union. This was one of the rare examples where at least you had two superpowers agreeing that maybe we should stop this arms race and actually do something before we blow ourselves up into annihilation and into extinction. And you know what else? We got to remember too, and I urge all of you to check out that interview that she did with Joe Rogan, as well as check out her Aloha launch. She mentions a story that I think we've all conveniently forgotten. Some time ago, Hawaii got a distress signal saying that, or the people of Hawaii got a national distress signal saying that a nuclear missile was immediately coming to the island and telling everyone to seek shelter. Now, thankfully, that wasn't real. Somebody failed to do their job and was, thank God, he was fired, and you know he's being held accountable. But just imagine how all those people on the island of Hawaii were feeling at the time. I mean, this was potentially their last days on planet Earth, all right? And you had families basically putting their kids into shelters or into sewers just so they would survive the immediate blast range. You had people spending their last moments with their loved ones, or you had families deciding, oh, which relative or which son or daughter do I have to spend my last minutes on Earth on? They're on one island, or there's one over there in the city. Who do I go to? Who do I call? Do I have time? And this is very real. All right, most of our nuclear weapons across the world, they're all pointed at each other. And the very fact that President Trump is now seriously talking about getting out of this treaty says that no one in his administration is holding him accountable, and no one's really challenging him. And so, thankfully, Democratic presidential candidate Tulsi Gabbard is the one that's stepping up. And I also want to mention too, when I first saw this article, I noticed that it was only RT America that basically covered this story. There's only very few other media outlets that are doing this, but they don't mention Tulsi Gabbard. I noticed that the media is actually trying to ignore Tulsi Gabbard now, which is a failure on their part. But this shows the strengths of United States Representative Tulsi Gabbard, especially when it comes down to addressing the dangers of nuclear war. She has dealt with it firsthand, or at least the potential threat of it towards her district and her community when that message went out. And it's very real. And she spoke about it during her Aloha launch about why we need to have a not only de-escalate our arms race, but dismantle our atomic weaponry so that we don't blow ourselves up into extinction. And so she's introducing this bill, and she said that if we scrap this treaty, we potentially also can scrap our other treaties with other nations that we have, same treaties, like China, for example. And so we need to stop, to basically stop this idea of Trump leaving the INF treaty. And they're basically, the bill that she's calling for would also prohibit a single taxpayer dollar from being used for weapons that could breach this treaty. So, Paul, I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's multifaceted. You would have to be in the boomer generation, or maybe one of the elder Gen Xers, to really remember solidly some of the nuclear scares, some of some of us may have seen the old archive video, the duck and cover stuff, which clearly would not have saved anyone from a nuclear holocaust. But that threat, right, the Cold War, the threat of nuclear annihilation at any moment was a very real, sort of visceral feel that a lot of people felt. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think of the comic book Watchmen is almost entirely built on that sort of existential dread of that at any moment life could be over due to nuclear annihilation. And
there was a lot of science fiction movies and books and shows that really talked about the threat and the aftermath of atomic war, nuclear war happening. And I think we've conveniently forgot about it, and really the danger of what can happen. And no, the world won't be like Mad Max. If the world went to war right now with the nuclear weaponry, we're done as a species. Maybe a pocket of humans will survive, but if you ever think we're going to come back to the level that we're at right now, that ain't going to happen for a very, 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 very long time.
Yeah, and so Tulsi Gabbard is extremely right to point out that removing from this treaty that was one of the first, if not the first, major treaty to begin, you know, calming down Cold War tensions in the late 80s, to finally get people to be like, I think we're past that. I think we're okay. There's this weird thing when there's now the common knowledge of the existence of nuclear warheads, this massive artillery that can level a city or more, that there's sort of this, well, there's the mutually assured destruction thing. If you launch yours, I'll launch mine. You don't want that, we don't want that, and then we don't want everyone to die, but we'll make sure everyone dies if that happens. It's kind of where it's been for a long time.
That's what's called MAD.
It's MAD. And things like this, they're like non-proliferation treaties. Essentially, they're like, let's not make any more. We've got enough, and it's like we have enough. We have enough to destroy this planet hundreds of times over. I'm confident. Like we don't need any more. We don't need anywhere near as many as we currently have.
There should be a de-escalation and
de-armament treaties and things like that would be awesome. And how do we get to that point though? That's such a difficult philosophical thing of saying we're not going to use a big weapon. Please don't use it on us. If we stop using it.
Look, I really don't know how we're going to really solve this problem so long as we have Trump in the White House. But there's another thing we got to remember too, is that you know, the Russian government did said that it would quit the treaty too in mere response to Trump's decision. So here you have two governments that are basically going to walk away from the treaty that they signed in 1988. And I wish someone in the administration, Trump's administration, would pull them aside and be like, this is not a good idea. But I don't think we're going to get that from anyone in Trump's administration. So the only group that can really do something is Congress and people like Tulsi Gabbard stepping up and saying, no, you're not going to leave this treaty. Because for somebody like her, the reality is real. Because let's face it, there is North Korea and its nuclear program that it has. Now, I'm not saying that the missiles can reach Hawaii or West Coast like that, or they got a competent missile program, but the threat is very, very real for everyone in that region. Paul?
So what's interesting is, from a geopolitical perspective, the United States essentially gains nothing from this. We put the world in a more precarious place. Russia is forced to respond by also, you know, withdrawing from the treaty. That's sort of a tit-for-tat kind of diplomacy. Should have seen that one coming. The only reason for the Trump administration to want to do this that I can surmise is they want to further demonstrate that Trump definitely isn't in the pocket of the Kremlin. He's not Putin's puppet. This, and look how tough I'm going to be. I'm gonna not, you know, respect this, you know, missile treaty that we wrote in the 80s to prevent, you know, the world from being destroyed. Look at me. Look, I'm going to saber rattle in that way. And this is one of those things that those of us who are like, this Russiagate thing doesn't really hold a lot of water, doesn't have a lot of evidence, and the more you loudly bark about this at people, the more you're going to incentivize the Trump administration to do something reckless like this. This is the only reasoning I can fathom for why the Trump administration would want to pull out of this treaty.
And one final note before we move on, I want to give a shout out to a couple people in the chat. Grandma Christine 42, Carbomoth, and 100 Peridot. I know each of you have commented that, you know, the Cuban Missile Crisis was scary, and that Carbomoth and 100 Peridot, that you grew up during that time period. I'm very sorry that you guys had to deal with that very real threat. And this is where guys like you, people like you, need to step up and remind people that, hey, we need to get actively involved and actually have a program or something to call for the de-escalation of nuclear arms, not only in this country, but worldwide, so we can actually have a better future. And thankfully, we have somebody like United States Representative Tulsi Gabbard, you know, leading the charge and putting a bill forward so that the United States does not leave the INF. All right, so let's just remember that. And is corporate media really going to give her fair coverage? Probably not, but independent media will. And I'm very glad at least somebody in Congress is leading the charge. And again, Tulsi Gabbard is running for president for 2020, so we're definitely going to follow through with you know, what she does with her bill and how many people will support it. Very important to note how many United States House representatives and U.S. senators will support her bill. That's including Democrats and Republicans.
If you liked that video, hit that thumbs up button. If you didn't, you know what to do. Also, make sure you hit subscribe and hit that bell icon so you know when new videos come out from Hard Lens Media.